We never actually met in person until I think it was maybe one of the debates or one of the elections or something. But I remember meeting you, and you were just as jaded about the whole thing as I was, and that's why I liked you.
We were authentic, Jeff. I always like to gravitate towards the authentic people.
Right. We were the two people who were like, what is all this bullshit, dude? This is episode 19 of 1F Jeff.
19 is a prime with a mystical streak. It marks the 19-year Metonic cycle that syncs the moon and sun, structures the Baha'i calendar into 19 months of 19 days, and features in the Quran's cryptic line, "Over it are 19." In tarot, it's the sun, symbolizing renewal, and in numerology, 1 + 9 reduces back to 1, suggesting completion and rebirth, a number that quietly closes a loop while beginning a new one.
Hello again, my friends. I'm not going to apologize this time because I've decided that I don't need to release the episodes every Tuesday. I can release them whenever I want during the week. As long as they come every week, that's good enough for me. And hopefully it's good enough for you. It'll be a surprise, so that's exciting. Who doesn't like excitement? A little excitement in your life? Get the heart pounding? A little sweat on your brow to wipe off dramatically? I have still been sick, though. I've been sick for like a week and a half now, and it's starting to drive me slowly insane. I think that, knock on wood, I'm finally like coming out of the woods, as they say. Is that what they say? But like Monday, I felt great. I was like, oh, I'm done. I'm cured. I'm fixed. I'm better. And then Tuesday, I woke up feeling fine. And then by noon, I was feeling like shit again. But today I feel like I've blown all the remaining snot out of my head. And I'm feeling, I would say, 85 to 90% better. So here's hoping that tomorrow gets me up to 95 or 100. Anyway, today's guest is Evelyn Quartz.
Evelyn Quartz is a political writer and former Capitol Hill staffer known for sharp critiques of the Democratic Party and U.S. political establishment. Based in Oregon, she's written for outlets like Jacobin and Courier Newsroom and runs a Substack focused on democracy, inequality, and elite capture. Her work blends insider experience with an outsider's skepticism about how power and messaging operate in American politics.
Evelyn and I worked at a high-profile super PAC together. I cannot name the high-profile super PAC because we both signed non-disclosure agreements. I think I do actually slip and mention the name of the organization at one point during this podcast. So if you're a good listener, you'll actually be rewarded in a sense. Maybe I should cut that out, but I don't know. It's like a little Easter egg for the careful listeners. As always, thank you to my new Patreon subscribers for supporting the show. I've been releasing some Patreon-only episodes on there, and people have been loving them. So if you'd like to enjoy them as well and support the show, please go to patreon.com/1FJeff and sign up for as little as $5 a month. You can help support the show and get some extra exciting content. I'll be putting out extra content fairly regularly, so if you love the podcast and want more, patreon.com/1FJeff. And ad infinitum, thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. Here's my conversation with Evelyn Quartz. Here with Evelyn Quartz. Thank you for coming on to the podcast. I know Evelyn from a job that will not be named that we both worked at, a political job that I worked at for 4.5 years. How long were you there, Evelyn?
About a year and a half.
Wow, you're only there a year and a half. That's crazy.
Yep.
And you came on my radar. Like I knew your name because we never actually met in person until I think it was maybe one of the debates or I don't know, was it the debate or one of the elections or something? But I remember meeting you, and you were just as jaded about the whole thing as I was, and that's why I liked you.
we were authentic, Jeff. I always like to gravitate towards the authentic people.
Right. We were the two people who were like, what is all this bullshit, dude? Yeah. So anyway, thanks for coming on. How has it been since we also got laid off at the same time? We also got laid off earlier this year, both at the same time, and we were both equally pissed off about it. and we kind of formed a support group, the two of us,
Yes.
about getting laid off. And I think it worked out well. I mean, I think we did a good job supporting each other during that horrible period.
Yeah, I think anyone who's had that experience, which unfortunately is like more and more people these days, knows that it's very cathartic and nice to have a friend who you can talk to. So yeah, I
Yeah.
appreciated you, Jeff.
I feel like we got to know each other even better just because we both got laid off at the same time.
Yeah, it's a bonding experience, no doubt.
It really
about
was.
that.
Yeah. We were basically just shitting on the organization on text messages all the time.
Then I remember I would text you and be like, Jeff, I'm going to a yoga class. Like, I'm going to be off this for an hour. And you were like, good for you.
Yeah. It was very cathartic.
Yeah.
So how's it been since? How have you been doing since?
I've been doing actually pretty well. I've been in this kind of weird, like, career transition, I guess you could say. I think, like, due to the nature of our jobs, right? Like, it was quite just the history, like the time that it all went down. This was like around the 2024 election. And we were working for a group supporting the Democrats. And I, in January, when it all kind of ended, went on kind of a personal, like, journey to figure out. So I'll back up. I started a Substack, like, you know, everybody does when they get laid off.
Sure. I started a podcast. You started a Substack.
Yeah. And first I'm like, oh, this will just be kind of cathartic and I'll just, like, you know, have something to do and whatever. And I started writing about politics. I kind of thought it was going to be like a resistance, kind of like Trump 2.0. That was very much like the worldview that I was in. But I now am very far from that. I'll say that. We can get into more about that. But I feel like I've gone through quite a political transformation, just like intellectually. It's been really interesting. In college, I studied philosophy. And,
Okay.
Yeah, and I was really interested in a lot of these things that I write about now. And instead of going to graduate school, which it was not something at the time. I kind of regret it now, but it was not something at the time that I wanted to do. I wanted to, like, be, I was so set on being, like, in the, like, quote unquote real world. So I moved to Washington, D.C. and started working I worked for, like, a polling firm, and then I worked on Capitol Hill for 6 years.
Okay.
So I feel like I spent most of my 20s kind of in this world of sort of the DC scene, I guess you could say. Like,
What did you do in Capitol Hill? What were you doing?
I started off as the press intern. I did communication stuff, and then when I left, I was the communications director for for a progressive member of Congress.
So you would go to you would, like, work in the Capitol every day?
Yeah, it was.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, for when you're like 24, that is, you know, you feel like you've won the lottery in a way. When
It's crazy. Yeah.
you get a job like that. And I had a lot of reverence for, like, the institution, and I think this is something I've been trying to figure out. Like, did I start believing in all of it? Because I definitely, you know, I went into it skeptical. I think, I know we're slightly different ages, but I grew up in the kind of Obama, everything was going to be managed and fine.
Yeah.
It wasn't too dark. Yeah. And I graduated. Yeah. So that was kind of my, like, worldview and politics growing up. Not super political.
Right. I mean, there was no need to be, because it wasn't like a political time. It was like everything's just kind of working, it seemed like.
Yeah, like, it's like hope and we're good kind of thing.
Right,
but
right,
when you're like, you know, a teenager, like, I wasn't explicitly political. I think it would be different now, and I know that, like, in the Bush era, a lot of young people were, but it just felt like more of like until the Occupy kind of movement, nothing really felt particularly dark.
Yeah, and even during Bush, like, I, you know, kind of grew up during that era, and, like, even during that, certainly there was, like, a lot of, like, protests and stuff, but it was nothing like what's going on now.
Right.
At all.
Yeah.
Like, you know. So.
Exactly. So I ended up starting in Capitol Hill in March of 2017. So that was like 2 months after the first inauguration of Trump. Wow. Yeah. So that was like all I really knew. And it felt like there was like amongst the liberal kind of progressive people who worked there was like a renewed sense of meaning almost. You know, if they were like, I think they were shocked, but they mobilized pretty quickly. And, you know, remember that whole era we had like the resistance movement and the women's march.
Yeah. The pussy hats and all that.
Yeah. Like I really believed all that up until pretty recently.
Right.
Yeah. And I've started to kind of unravel a lot of these, I guess, beliefs that I used to have. It's like the best analogy I can come up with is like The Matrix, which I think is like, in retrospect, one of the best works of art when you're thinking about this kind of stuff, where you take, like, I don't want to say I take the red pill because I haven't become a conservative.
Right.
But
right.
I've become very jaded by like ideology and
Sure.
liberal politics. Yeah. Yeah.
And why did you want to go into politics in the first place?
I think I always really liked political philosophy in college. And I feel like the kind of big questions about how society governs and just being able to work like in the sort of halls of power of the government, it just was very enticing to me. But I was under no illusion that like the system was broken. I think I always thought the system was broken, but I became a believer, and it's really interesting. I think that's what happens. Like a lot of idealistic young people think they can go in and still hold on to this sort of radicalism that they have.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But what happens is you become absorbed by the system. And
well, it's like Obama. It's like Obama, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of like the entire story of Obama, who, you know, his campaign was all hope and change and truly stuff that was really inspiring to me. I mean, I remember like crying watching him get inaugurated.
Exactly.
But then, you know, he got sucked into the system and it all, I mean, there's more at play there than that. But I think a large part of it is just the system, makes you conform to the brokenness, I suppose.
Yeah, it's like somebody comes in with a binder and is like, no, this is the way it is, you know? Or
right. Well, there's a Bill Hicks joke. He's like, I think when every president gets elected, they put him in a room with a bunch of like industrialist smoking guys in a dark room, and they pull down a screen and they show him a shot of the Kennedy assassination from an angle that he's never seen before. And they're like, any questions?
Exactly.
Right,
yeah.
right.
And then he starts supporting all the like Bush era surveillance and wars and stuff.
Right. First we bomb Baghdad. Right.
Yeah. And I think it's a bigger question of it, like how the system, how you get sucked in, and then you become like the kind of just pageantry of it all.
Mm-hmm.
You become like very much. That's very enticing, I think, to a lot of people, and I certainly found that too. It's a lot of like. You feel like important, right?
Yeah.
And I think that once you walk away from that, you see it all as just so disconnected from what politics should be for, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when you talk to people, like right now I live in the middle of Oregon, and by no means is like politics, a part of my daily, like it's just, I just have conversations with people, and if it happens to come up, it comes up, and it just feels like, when we talk to people, it's so, DC feels like such a insular and almost self-obsessed kind of world.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Thinking back to your days, like working on Capitol Hill, like what was it? I mean, you were probably starstruck when you started, of course. And then was there anything that I guess was surprising to you, or was profoundly, like, was there a moment that you remember being like, oh, that's not what I imagined this would be?
I think there was a really interesting moment when I got to go to a meeting that was like the Democratic leadership. So it was like Nancy Pelosi and Steny Hoyer, and then all of the committee chairs. So it was like the most powerful people in the House. Yeah, and it was like a small meeting in the Speaker Pelosi's office. And there's something about that moment that I always think, like, they're just human beings,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a lot of that place runs on just like human interactions, where like all the like kind of behind the scenes stuff, it really is. I mean, a lot of people make the joke that it's like Veep, but that's what I think of, to be honest, when I like look at those sort of interactions. And like we would staff members, and they would all like, you know, it was very political of like who gets to stand where and like who gets to talk first. So you think like on TV you see them, you know, just speaking at these press conferences and stuff, but behind the scenes you're like, wow, that was a very scripted, you know, set of talking points that had to be approved by, you know, 7 different people. And you see it just really for what it is.
Was it a slow process of getting jaded by it, or was it kind of just, I mean, did you go in starry-eyed, you know, everything, and then kind of as you were working there you started to see things, or was this all that happened after like in the past year? Was it most of it? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it was both. Like, I think I went in jaded and then bought into the system. So I was like, then I became a defender of the system. And then I got jaded after doing that I think during COVID really was when we all like, were forced to, you know, sit at home and kind of ponder if there's a meaning of life beyond work. Those of us who were like, especially me, like, I feel like come from a generation where we were told as like young women that, you know, work was the most important thing. So you're sitting there and like, oh my gosh, you know, I've really let this absolve so much of my personality and like life. And then that's where I think I was like, this place just feels, it feels really hard to impact. Like, you can have an impact. I'm not saying that there aren't well-meaning people who are necessary for that place to run. And there's something like really important about people who are still there doing that. But I think if you really zoom out, you think like, you know, am I really having an impact? Is this really what I want to be doing? So, yeah.
What was the goal though? Like, where did you see yourself when you first started working on Capitol Hill?
Well, I think every young staffer just dreams of like, it's very hierarchical. So like you start as like a staff assistant and you get paid nothing. And like a lot of people work at like the bar down the street so that they can make enough money. Then the chief of staff is making, you know, I think the max salary is like $210,000 or something.
Not bad.
Yeah. So it's like a wild, and the majority of people there, I don't know the exact age breakdown, but it's run by people under 50, basically. Like, it's a lot of young people. You'll see chief of staffs who are like, you know, late 20s, early 30s. That's very common.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So the incentives are a bit bizarre. And there's really I don't know if people know this about Capitol Hill too. There's no like HR. Every office runs like a small business. So you have a lot of offices where the staff and the members, it becomes very toxic, and there's no sort of there's no formal system necessarily. So a lot of the time it's a bit of a mess.
I mean, that explains a lot about the organization that we worked at together, because that was the same kind of situation for most of it. And there was a lot of pageantry about HR, but it never was actually enacted in any real profound way. So that's interesting, but it makes sense because these are all people coming from politics, going into politics. So I always kind of wondered why there was never any thought put into like HR or anything there. And then now that you tell me that, I was like, oh, now it all makes sense. And you know, they didn't work in HR stuff, so why would they have HR?
Right. And I think there's another thing that in these types of, I think it's very common in like high level political, whether it's like the super PACs or the, you know, elected offices or campaigns, where there's like a sense that you should just be grateful to be there. Right.
That was the same with the organization we worked for.
Yeah. And so you think, oh, well, you know, I get to do this really cool job and like it's prestigious and whatever. Like,
I'm changing the world.
Yeah. Like it's okay. I can deal with this. But yeah, obviously no workplace should run on toxicity. And
so why did you decide to get out of Capitol Hill? What was the decision there?
Well, I had been I grew up in California, been wanting to come back to the West Coast, just for kind of a change of, you know, pace. And I've always felt more at home on the West Coast. And so that was partly it. And yeah, it felt like the time. I had just turned
Right.
30 and spent all my 20s in DC and just was ready for something different.
Right. Right. So then you ended up at the organization that we worked for, which seems weird to say. We should have a different, like the AP group or something, but whatever.
Alias.
How were you looking to get back in politics in some way, or did it just kind of fall in your lap? It fell in my lap, so I have no idea how you
Yeah.
came to it.
I think it fell in mine too. I think it's interesting, like, what happens when you acquire a set of skills, right? And then in this kind of job market, it's almost like your options are selected for you in a way, I think.
Right.
I know your story was actually kind of different. You'd never worked in politics, right?
Yeah, no, I had moved to Columbus for a job as an art director at Hollister, the teenager clothing company.
Yeah.
And doing video stuff because I went to school for video stuff, and got laid off during COVID, and was like, well, shit, I moved to Columbus. Why did I move to Columbus? Now what am I going to do? And then, like, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks later, a friend of mine from New York called me and was like, hey, I know this guy at the Lincoln Project, which at the time was like blowing up. Like, this is 2020, and this is just when they were starting to explode. And he was like, I know a guy who works for Lincoln. They need a new editor. And so before I knew it, I was signed on to like a 3-month contract. And then it just kept going. It just kept going and going and going. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And now I never want to work in politics again.
What has your journey been? Like, I've talked a little bit about how I consider myself now, like, I guess the word I would use is like heterodox. I don't really like any sort of ideology. And I think, I mean, that's not to say I don't have like beliefs, right? And like moral orientation around this stuff. But I think that when people adhere to ideology as like dogma, like in almost a religious sense, they become like the amount of things that you're able to think about becomes very like a closed feedback loop. I mean, I think that echo chambers on the sort of center left are often just as bad, if not worse, as those on the right.
Oh, absolutely. I think that, yeah. And the 24-hour media companies are to blame for a large percentage of that.
Yeah.
Anyway, don't get me started on that. Because it makes me upset to think about that. But yeah, sorry, you were saying.
Well, I was going to ask you, like, how do you see your role as just like a political, like just a citizen in this country post working at that job?
That's an interesting question. Growing up, like, I saw Bill Clinton speak in Cleveland when I was younger, and we were all very inspired by him. And I was a liberal growing up. I was all, very, because it was, I think it was, early internet, pre-internet. There was so much less. I really think the internet is the cause of most of the things that are happening now, because we just didn't have the amount of information that we have now, and they didn't have the tools, the algorithms to siphon us into our own little silos like they do now.
Yes.
And I think that, I don't know, working at that organization for 4.5 years, like, at first I was very excited, and it was a fun job for, most of it, honestly, because I got to make just wacky Trump videos for a lot of it, which was super fun. And then they were on MSNBC, and it was like, yay,
Right.
It wasn't until he won again in 2024, after everybody at that organization said he wasn't going to win, like everyone. And I thought, and when they said that, I thought, oh, well, he can't possibly win. These are people who have worked in politics for years. Of course they would know.
Yes.
And they didn't seem to have any idea. But yeah, that really was a surprise. I mean, it wasn't a profound surprise to me, but it was also a profound surprise to me. I don't know how else to put that. And that kind of shifted my thinking. Honestly, the shift had already been happening because COVID, I think, shifted a lot of things. But I'm at a place now where I can't subscribe to either of these parties. And I kind of think that, I mean, in a lot of ways, I feel like I'm kind of nihilistic in the sense that I feel like it's fairly broken at this point. And I don't really know how we're going to find our way out of this. I'm actually curious to hear what you think might get us out of this, because I really don't. And that's what scares me the most, is I'm like, how do we get out of this hole that we are digging ourselves into without like a profound economic crash, some disaster or some war of some sort that shifts society in some way. I just don't know how we suddenly turn the ship around in a way that's going to rescue us. So I forget what your question was, but yeah, I'm pretty cynical about the whole thing now. And mostly I think that it's fascinating, a great show. Like I don't get emotionally involved in it anymore. I think working in it for so long did that to me. So I don't think that I do anyway. I don't really get triggered or upset by it. I'm just kind of like, whoa, how crazy is this getting? This is getting nuts. I mean, when I start being affected personally by it, that's when maybe I'll start to get truly emotionally affected by it. But it all seems like a weird reality show at this point, which makes sense considering the president. But I don't know. I don't feel a lot of hope at this point, and I don't know if there's any real. The fact that the organization that we worked at, that I truly believed in for a period of time, like truly turned into, I mean, was always probably in my mind a profound grift. That to me is like a microcosm of the bigger picture. Like it's all kind of a giant shell game grift.
Yeah.
I mean, Trump's the biggest grifter of all time, so of course he's the one who's now in charge because, like, of course, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, I just don't know. I mean, there's so many levels of it right now. Like, there's so much going on that's so bad that I don't even know where to begin sometimes. Like, I don't even like to talk about politics on this podcast because it's like, it's so many, it's like layers and layers upon layers of fucked upness. You know, I don't know if you saw that article in the Times today about with the justices who they'd interviewed like early on in his term. And they asked like how bad they thought it would get, how bad, blah, blah, blah. And then they interviewed him now. And there was like nonpartisan group of judges. And like now they're like, it's way worse than we ever could have possibly imagined.
Right.
And that's hard to, you know, but we hear these things every day now. That's the thing. Like, it's not just once in a while that, like, it's like day after day after day of America falling to pieces. And yeah, I don't know how you stop it. I don't know what you do. I don't know if that answered your question, but how do you think this ends? How do you think that we get out of this mess?
Yeah, that's no small question. So it's funny, or it's interesting. I am finding myself in quite a dark headspace a lot of the time.
Yeah.
But it's not for the reason that I used to be. When I believed the stuff that you were just talking about, this kind of worldview where the system was presumed to be pretty much fine under someone like Biden and probably someone like Harris, but Trump was seen as the the big bad evil.
Right.
And if we had just rid the system of Trump, it would be democracy. That's the narrative that I've become quite skeptical of.
Yes.
Because when you look at the history, and there's a lot of people who have been doing really good work and writing on this, often pretty thanklessly for, excuse me, for a long time, you start to learn about the ways in which over the last 40, 50 years, the economy has taken a turn towards what people would often term neoliberalism. Yep. This sort of Reagan, Thatcher idea of this very kind of twisted idea around free markets and individualism, when in fact the state ends up just kind of reverting into itself and making basically like getting into bed with corporations and with globalization, right? So it's not so much that there is like the free market thing is in that way very much a myth.
Yep.
The state is quite involved in the sort of the financialization of different sectors of our society. Then you had the 90s with globalization. And then you have Trump, who was speaking to a lot of the pain, the very real economic pain that people felt as a result of those policies, which happened under both parties, right? They happened under Reagan, Clinton, Bush, and Obama.
Sure.
Yeah. And the sort of liberal, I call it liberal, but what I mean by that is this sort of centrist kind of Harris voter, which it incorporates a lot of the conservative and neoconservatives, kind of the older like generation ones, not what it's become now. So that's what I'm talking about when I mean that. But yeah, if you frame Trump as the singular villain, you absolve everyone who has been complicit in upholding a system that has been inherently undemocratic and very unfair for a long time before Trump. And to me,
absolutely,
to me, Trump is the result of these policies. And I have a lot of regret in amplifying narratives in which we called his voters kind of irredeemably racist and stupid and ignorant. We did that in service of this greater narrative that was basically just all a pawn, like a ploy to give the keys back to this old group of, elites, basically, whether that be financial elites, political elites, this consultant class, who had really wrecked the system in a lot of ways, even if that was not their intention, that was the outcome of their policies. And in doing that, we dismiss sort of the humanity of millions of Americans. And I'm not saying that Trump is not racist and fascist. There's certainly elements of his personality and his movement that are. I'm saying that we really missed the point, I think. And now my work tries to look at this a lot more critically and outside of these sort of dogmatic worldviews.
I don't feel like they wanted to see the point. I kind of feel like some people saw the point, but deliberately ignored it or obfuscated it because it worked better for their political ends, really.
Exactly.
Like if you can, to paint Trump as the I mean, I hate Trump. He's a fucking, I just don't think he's a very smart guy, number one, but whatever, we can go on and on. But yeah, I think that both sides, I mean, you look at the media companies too, it's like both sides remember when he first came out, they were showing his speeches on MSNBC, the entire thing.
Oh yeah, because their ratings were through the roof.
Exactly, right? So they made a fortune off of this man, right? They all did, right? Yeah. And so I think that ultimately, on maybe a different level, it's like the legalized bribery that's been going on for the last 50 years and gotten worse and worse. And now you get Trump's inauguration and it's just right there in the open. It's just like the people who are bribing the government are right there in front of you. And it's just like, my big issue is like getting money out of politics, getting all the bribery out of politics. How do you even do that? You get a constitutional amendment? I don't know. I don't know. But I agree with what you're saying, even though what I just said didn't really relate to it.
I remember you asked me like that really big question about where we go from here.
Right. How do we get out of this? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That's the $1 million question. I don't have the answer to that, obviously. But I do have some sort of inkling of like where I am now. I think I've come to the point where it'll take some sort of redistributionist agenda that will expand the social welfare state in this country. I think if we can't advocate for, socialism, right? Like people say, yeah, okay, that's utopic. I kind of understand where they're coming from. I think if we have some sort of concrete demand or political project, it has to be around restructuring the sort of rebuilding the social contract between the state and the people, in which people are not given these kind of almost insulting programs like SNAP, which you have to be incredibly impoverished to even qualify for, or the ACA expansion or Medicaid, but an actual robust social safety net that empowers people to live like a dignified life.
Sure.
I think.
I guess my question. Go ahead. Sorry.
Or are you gonna ask me how we're gonna get there?
Exactly. Like, how on earth are we going? Like,
Yeah.
yeah. Exactly.
Okay, so my thinking about this, I think this is all, obviously this is not super pragmatic,
Sure.
this is pretty high level. I think
Right.
it's going to take, people asked me a lot when I started writing about the Democrats, a lot of the writing I do is about sort of the ideological bankruptcy, of moral bankruptcy of the Democrats right now. People ask me, how are we going to solve it? I say that I think it's going to take some outside force to take over the party, like what happened with the Republican Party and Trump. I think they need sort of a left version of something like that. And I'm not saying that any of this is like tangible or likely.
Right. I just don't even see it. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that's where I've come to in terms of the practical.
I think the Democrats had their shot with Bernie Sanders and they just kind of blew it.
Exactly.
Because I think I'll say it, Bernie Sanders would have beat Trump in 2016, I think. Because he spoke to the same anger at the elites that Trump does. And I think a lot of people voted for Trump because of the anti-elite sentiment that he preaches, right? Whereas, you had Kamala Harris, dancing with Beyonce or whatever the hell.
Right.
And I think Bernie Sanders would have won. And I think it's like, this is what you get. You had your chance, Democrats. You had your chance. You had your big shot, and you decided to blow it. So, in that sense, like, I guess I don't see. I mean, if this kind of opportunity comes again with the Bernie Sanders like candidate, like, are they gonna jump on it, or are they just gonna be like, no, we want what's his name in California, the Slick Willie, whatever.
Gavin Newsom. I have no doubt, that the Democrats will choose someone like that. I guess I back up a little bit and say two things. The first is, if we look at sort of eras, like they do this a lot in other countries, like in France, they call it like a new republic. So it's like the fourth, fifth republic. I think the era of sort of neoliberalism as the bipartisan governing consensus, which you could say ran from like 1980 to probably 2008 when the financial crisis, but then it was kind of revived until 2016 when Trump broke it open. And some people will argue that Trump is a continuation of neoliberalism because his policies, like the tax bill, largely do uphold sort of this corporate friendly environment. I think though it is also a break, and this is where the like democracy people, I don't think they've quite really maybe thought this through. I think the pro-democracy movement is kind of surface level, where it focuses on this narrow definition of democracy as like
what does that even mean?
Right. It's just like this institutional preservation. It doesn't focus on sort of the more economic aspect.
Right. Quote unquote democracy is what they're trying to say.
Right.
The democracy we never actually really had in this country, but still we'll hold on to that as an ideal and a goal. But yeah.
Right. And you can see that Trump has really not a lot of regard for that. And
no.
I think, for all of the like Trump's a fascist, which was kind of, I think, very overblown for a long time, to the point where now that you mentioned earlier, we're seeing these pretty remarkable turns. I think.
Yeah, now I'm starting to get there. Yeah.
Right. And you think,
for
me, like the ICE, what's going on with ICE and Trump trying to deploy the military to cities, that seems to kind of be like a secret police, sort of fascist thing.
Yeah, a little bit. A little bit, yep.
Yeah, and so I almost feel like we're a bit desensitized now to the idea that this could be a turn towards authoritarianism that actually is kind of revolutionary.
Right. I think he's deploying military to these cities so that they get kind of used to it. So when the next election comes and he loses, he can just send the military in, I think there's a lot of bad things that could come from that. I'm not exactly sure what the goal is there, but I think that's definitely part of it, to help out with the next election.
Right. Like, who knows? And I think the problem is that the Democratic establishment, people like Gavin Newsom, also don't really seem to care to take on sort of the neoliberal consensus. And to me, if that has died and you're trying to revive it, I'm just not sure that that's going to work in 2028. I have been watching a lot of, I don't know if you watch any Tucker Carlson.
A little bit. He confuses me now.
Yes. A lot of people are saying, oh, wow, like he's making sense. Tucker Carlson to me is a really interesting brand of maybe some sort of look into what a future kind of right populist movement could look like.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah.
So Tucker Carlson, Joe Rogan does this too. They both have this kind of shtick, which Carlson made that speech at the Turning Point USA speech a couple of months ago that got a lot of attention, where he said something to the effect of, I'm an American citizen and I should be able to just ask questions. We should know these things, what's going on. And he plays this kind of like befuddled, kind of everyday guy talking to these experts. And he's just done a new series on 9/11 on YouTube. And it's got like 5, each episode has like 4 or 5 million views.
Of course, yeah.
And it's this idea that actually used to be much kind of more belonged to the left, which is this like deep skepticism of this sort of bureaucratic state, whether that's the intelligence agencies. I think you see it in a lot of institutions. That's why I think Trump has put people in charge of most of his agencies who kind of have the intention of like dismantling them somehow. So I think that this is all a very interesting, we're in a big kind of moment of realignment. And to me, somebody like Tucker Carlson is going to be much more, I'm not saying I endorse it or I would vote for him. I'm just saying that that message is much more resonant than the kind of Newsom, Trump's taking down our democracy, although that still might work if we go so far, if Trump goes so far in this direction. I don't know, but I just think the policies that the Democratic establishment is going to try to put up for to the people in the midterms and in 2028 are not going to fly. Like they're even talking about running Kamala Harris. Yeah. Oh my God. And it's incredible. So to me, like there's a zeitgeist thing going on that's moved
to the ground.
Yeah, and it's moved past the Democrats, right? Like their approval ratings are terrible. They've basically hinged their horse to this idea that Trump can get so bad that the pendulum will just kind of naturally swing back to them.
That's a great strategy.
Right. I just don't think it's going to work. And so if I have any hope, I guess what I'm trying to say is that there will be more of an opening this time for a left populist candidate to kind of infiltrate the Democratic Party and make a more serious run. I just think it's going to be, the Democrats are going to do what they've always done, and they're going to use every tool at their disposal to preserve this kind of status quo.
And the question I always have about a populist candidate is like, where are they going to get their money? Like 99%, 98% of the time, the candidate with the most money wins. So like, you run a populist candidate running on like an anti-corporate ideology, which kind of you'd have to do. Like, where are they going to get money from? They're not. I mean, the corporations are so involved with billions of dollars to fund these elections. Like, the winner is the corporate winner, right? That's the one who's been paid off the most to follow the corporate dogma. That's what scares me the most, is that you can't even get your foot in the door, right? I mean,
well, yes and no. I do think with the New York City election, we saw the power of a candidate who was not in the pockets of like the oligarchs.
That's true. Where did he raise his money? Did he raise it all? Was it all grassroots?
I think a lot of it was. I'm sure. I don't have it off the top of my head, but I can't imagine that he took corporate money. They do have ways to like get around that. Certain politicians do with like. But I mean, that's the question, I guess, too, with Mamdani. And I made this point I wrote a piece for The Lever with David Sirota, actually, on the night that he won, where we made the comparison to Obama having the populist message and a lot of grassroots money, but he also had the kind of the oligarchs in his tent. Mamdani seemed to do it without the oligarchs, but now people are raising the question of, is he going to be able to govern like that?
Right.
Is it going to turn out like AOC, who's pretty much kind of capitulated to the establishment?
She really has. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think these are all questions that are interesting. Like, can a self-funded president, I mean, the reason that Trump also was so successful, right? And like Michael Bloomberg is they're already billionaires. They don't really, that's why Trump could go on
Right.
stage at the RNC and say, we're done with these forever wars because he didn't need their money. And so, it's a big problem in politics.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what we need is like a, extremely wealthy progressive, but like that's
we've been trying, Jeff. I've been
oxymoron.
I know. Right? I've been talking to people about doing like a media organization, and it's funny. Every day there's like this new liberal Substack or something that has like 5 billionaires bankrolling them, and we're like, oh, if only there was like a socialist billionaire. They just don't exist. Right. It's really money is very tight on the left.
Right, because do you think there's any hope for like I have an idea where there's two ways to get a constitutional amendment. You have to do it through Congress, which is never going to happen, but you can do it two-thirds of the states, right? You have to have a vote. 2/3 of the states have to approve it.
Yeah.
I feel like money in politics is an issue that both sides agree upon. Generally speaking, I think that like most people, if you ask them if we need to get the money out of politics, they would be like, absolutely, we need to get corporate money and all that crap out of politics. Yes, we do.
Yeah.
And I feel like if there was somebody who came out, and I don't know who that would be, but like who was able to take this message and pull people together with this message and actually get this kind of election to happen where we can actually get an amendment to get, I don't know what it would say, of course, but to get corporate money and just all the money basically out of politics and have publicly funded elections, et cetera, which would be a huge change in America, of course, but a necessary one. I think you would get that vote. But again,
the problem is
another pipe dream.
The moneyed interest would tank it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which again brings me back to that. I don't know how you're going to fix the system that has been so corrupted by money, because money is always going to corrupt any effort to fix it.
Yeah. There are a lot of people who've
cynical.
Who've dedicated their kind of activism on the left to this issue that I find very admirable. I mean, I agree with you though. I think the electorate, the voter, is overwhelmingly in favor of policy of getting rid of money in politics. There's no question about that.
And it's just gotten worse and worse and worse, to the point where now it's just basically out in the open. I mean, wasn't it at one point Nixon got like bags full of money or something, and that was a big thing? Now it's like they could just write him a check right in public in front of him for to be like, oh, all right, there's Elon Musk giving him a little money. That's fine.
Yeah, I mean, I think like when Musk, before they had their whole falling out, and he was cozying up to Trump to get all these contracts and stuff, it was just out in the open. Like that's how the government and businesses have been running for decades, right? The corporations have benefited enormously from the state, whether that's through subsidies or tax credits or the availability of like lobbying. That's, I guess, going back to like, that's another thing that's hard to get across sometimes with people who are more kind of married to this idea that Trump is the bad guy. You can say, no, this is, a much greater problem with the system that both sides have been complicit in.
For sure.
And Trump is just sort of I actually think a lot of people's anger at Trump, a lot of the like liberal elite and conservative elite anger at Trump is just that he breaks the decorum of a president. It's for like sure. A lot of the policies and stuff are actually quite similar to things that have happened in previous administrations. When he went in to bomb Iran, the neocons were thrilled, right? So,
sure.
I mean, there's a lot of policy continuation that they actually like, but the fact that he puts such an ugly face and is so brash and doesn't follow any of their kind of elite norms, I think is actually what upsets them the most.
Yeah, I mean, although I would say like the attack on the judiciary is really a problematic part of his administration that seems very organized and deliberate. A slow dismantling of what we understood the judicial system to be and the judiciary to be and what they were supposed to do, using it perhaps to to go after your enemies. We haven't seen that. I mean, Nixon maybe did that, but I don't think nearly at the level that Trump seems to be doing it. And yeah, we've lost, I think, like a third of the judges in the country. I mean, it's incredible what's happened.
Yes.
And that concerns me. So, Evelyn, what do you do when you're not thinking and writing about politics?
Well, that's a good question.
Like, what brings you joy in this dark time that we live in?
Yeah, that's nice, Jeff. I would say, well, I live in a beautiful place, and I'm very grateful to live where I live. I live in a place that has a lot of forest and mountains, and I take my dogs. I have 2 dogs. I take them every day for an hour-long walk in the forest, and that is the best part of my day, without question.
Is it the same path every time, or is it a different route?
We have this beautiful big park. I think it's like a couple 100 acres, and I kind of just get there and decide which path I'm going to take that day. How we're feeling, how the weather is. If it's hot, then we need to go to the path that goes down to the river so they can get some water. It's beautiful. And yeah, for me, like that's very centering. I also find like exercise has been very grounding.
Yep.
I know we talked about this. What do you do to get away?
Oh, I mean, honestly, this year I've been traveling a lot. Like I'm trying to figure out, I'm in a pretty transition. Like I still don't have a job, and I need to find a job of some sort. I'm hoping to get remote work so I can like do the digital nomad thing because I'm not attached like in Columbus to anything really. I have some friends here, but I'm not really. And like I'm not married. I don't have any kids, which most people at my age do. So it's like, why am I not living?
Didn't you go down to Mexico City?
I did. I was going to go. So I've been working, remotely with the organization that shall not be named, for 4.5 years. And I never really took advantage of it. I did a little bit take advantage of the work remotely thing, but not as much as I wish I had. So finally, like when I think it was before the election or after the election, when we were told you'll all have jobs going forward, I thought, well, this is great. I'm actually going to do the digital nomad thing finally. And so I booked this trip to Mexico, but then of course, got laid off. So I was like, fuck it, I'm going to go anyway. And
how was it?
Spent like, it's great. I've never been to Mexico City. It's amazing.
I've heard amazing things. It seems to be like a very hot destination these days.
It's very trendy. Yeah. It's, but I really loved it. And I'm thinking I'm going to go back either in a couple of months or I don't know when, but yeah, I really loved it, and it's much less expensive. And I mean, the things you would hear, like I have asthma, like childhood asthma, and so I have that the albuterol inhaler that I get here with my insurance. It always goes back to politics, Jeff. Why do you always have to do this? But
that's America.
But it really blew my mind though.
Yeah.
So I get this albuterol inhaler. I get through insurance. You have to have a prescription, of course. Get through insurance, and I pay for like $10 for it, but I'm sure that it's being billed at like $120 or whoever knows how much. This stuff is like basically free to make. In Mexico, I can buy them over the counter in the pharmacy for $10 a piece with no insurance.
Yeah.
I'm told that the most expensive health insurance plan you can get in Mexico is $2,000 a year. A year.
This is the thing. Every other country. I have a friend who just moved to Costa Rica, and they also have a similar universal healthcare, much more affordable, much more accessible.
I mean, you don't even really need healthcare in Mexico because it's cheap. You can just pay out of pocket.
Yeah,
right?
It's amazing.
And like you start to wonder, why are we still in America? Because like it's not serving us as a place, right? Like it's not serving me very well. I struggle to come up with a thing that like a reason. I mean, aside from friends and family and stuff, why I'm staying here. Not to say that there's not bad things going on in Mexico or wherever else, but I just feel like I can't afford this country anymore.
It does feel like the future in America is like, for the first time in my life as a young person, feels very desolate in a way that we never were told, like you were never like indoctrinated to think that America would be a place of failing opportunity, right? That you were told to believe the opposite, and you're right. I mean, we've got an extremely oversaturated job market for people who have 4-year degrees. The housing is unbelievably expensive. We pay, right? We have this whole like class that benefits off of us basically just being lifelong renters of everything.
I mean, they get in Europe, they get 6 weeks of vacation. Everybody does. 6 weeks.
I know.
Like, I mean, it's all at the same time too, which is even more amazing in a way. But like, I just start to wonder, and then I start to like, I've really gone down a rabbit hole since I got laid off, like with too much thinking. But like, what are like, you know, I want to work, I want to contribute something, and like, but I don't want to have to just do something for a paycheck. And I know that's a privileged place to sit here and stay. And frankly, in 3 months, I'll probably be like, actually, no, I take that back. I need some money.
Yeah.
But like, I just want to be able to make money on my own terms, you know? And that also seems privileged, but I don't think it's unattainable. And I just need to figure out how to do it. And I think that part of that is like that I won't make as much money, but I can live somewhere else and then not have to make as much money, you know?
Exactly. I think I've come to the realization that I might never have a single employer ever again. I think for me right now, like having multiple streams of income feels like the best way to kind of make it in this economy, because if you diversify, you can kind of lean on whatever's going well at that time. Like granted, it's still really hard to make it all work, but I think I see this too. Like young people seem to, like Gen Z. I'm like a prime millennial. Gen Z people seem to.
Right.
I'm a prime millennial who went into the workforce thinking I could work at one place. Which, to be fair, like I probably could have had I stayed in Washington. But then you have to make other sacrifices, and you have to ask yourself at the end of the day, like, what kind of life do I want to live? Right.
Right. Live to work or work to live. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I think that like this kind of freelance, self-employed, it's a different lifestyle. It's definitely like, I feel like I'm working and reading and writing and thinking and talking to people like 7 days a week. But to be self-directed is like, it feels like such a privilege in a way too. It's like I wake up every day and I think, oh my goodness, like I get to decide what I'm going to focus on, right? Or what I'm going to work on. And I never,
right. And it's something you're interested in and passionate about. And you want to do it.
And I never had that kind of autonomy when I was working for other people. And I think that's a real problem too with our work culture in general, is most people's jobs are not really that dignified work. They're sitting at a desk being told what to do all day. And if more people had the ability to have more kind of ownership and control over their days and their time, we would have a lot more freedom, as a society.
When I worked at Hollister, we'd have these like division-wide meetings, and they would talk about how many jeans we sold to teenagers, and people around me would like go, woo! And I would think like, what on earth has happened to you? Like what? Like, I understand you, everybody wants to be part of like a club, but like what on earth? Do you Anyway, and at that moment, I think I realized like I can't, corporate things it doesn't work for me.
You can't get excited about it.
I mean, I can't get excited about selling how many jeans we sold, how many distressed jeans we sold right in the last quarter.
Right.
But a lot of people did get very excited, and and watch in like a year or two, I'll be like doing ads for Hollister on my podcast.
Well, that's the dream though, in a dark way too, isn't it?
It kind of is actually, yeah. Weird sort of way. Not for Hollister necessarily, but I would like some advertisers because it would help with
Do you like a new mattress or some athletic greens?
Right. Believe me, I have mentioned many different products in this podcast just to see if I can get on the radar.
Do you think? I have an interesting question for you about podcasting. I feel like I've gravitated away from the really scripted ones and into probably, this is, like podcasts like yours, Jeff, where it's a conversational and it's just, it doesn't feel forced. So much of the time that I worked in Democratic politics, like your boss would go on a show and have super rigid talking points.
Right.
And it just felt so fake. And to me, like
the Sunday shows, right?
Yeah, and it's funny when Democrats will say like, "Oh, we just need our own Joe Rogan," but the reason that they can't succeed on Joe Rogan is because they can't speak beyond talking points.
Right. Exactly.
And it feels like the media landscape has just completely evolved towards these more like honest conversations, and it's so funny to me to watch the kind of consultants like scratch their head and say, why can't we have this? But it seems so obvious.
But I mean, to be fair, I don't think that the Republicans generally, outside of Trump and maybe a few others, are able to talk very well outside of their talking points either. I think that
it takes a really unique kind of politician. I was thinking about this, where you have to be really confident in like what you're saying, and you have to be interesting. I just listened to James Tallarico. Have you followed him? He's the new guy from Texas.
No, I've kind of checked out to a degree.
That's fair. So have I. I'm like not super excited about anyone, but he was on Joe Rogan, and they had a beautiful like 2-hour conversation about like spirituality and stuff.
Joe Rogan's an interesting one. Like I've kind of come and gone from his show, but like I don't know. What I used to really like about that show is it felt like AM radio. I'm going to date myself, but like AM radio back in the day, used to tune in the middle of the night, and there was like this Art Bell guy, and there was a few others, but Art Bell was the big one. And it was just this like call-in show that he would kind of just go anywhere and talk about the craziest shit, have UFO people on, all these kind of things, but just like agree with them and not mock them, you know? And I think Joe Rogan at his best has, or at least used to have legitimately, like people with legitimately crazy beliefs, that they believed in fervently, and he would just say, yes, tell me more, and give them a place where they can just be heard, right, over and over and over, and never make fun of it, but say, oh yeah, I agree, you know, to a detriment to a degree. But then he had RFK on and said the same thing, and that's not good. But yeah,
right.
And it was fascinating because I love to hear somebody who believes, you know, he was on a UFO and got probed up the ass or whatever. I love to hear him just can talk for 3 hours because he's going to go way deep, right? He's going to go all the way in. But
it's
when he went to the inauguration, I started to have issues having Trump on. I guess, I don't know. I like Joe Rogan, but I don't like Joe Rogan.
I haven't
listened to him for years. Yeah.
Yes, I feel the same way, and I like to listen knowing that I'm going to disagree with some of the stuff. And I think
he's kind of an idiot. He's kind of an idiot is the thing, though. He's not that, I mean, he's smart in some ways, but he's not like smart in any
But
real
if he
way
makes some sort
all.
of blanket statement that I think is, you know, like offensive or wrong or whatever, it's just like shallow and whatever, I can hold that next to maybe something he says that I find to be correct or interesting or has some sort of point to it. I think that like the problem is we're so siloed, and I agree with you, there's a line, but if we can listen to something and you actually have to think about if you agree or disagree, it's not like preordained at the start. I think that's good overall for people's.
Yeah, my issue with Rogan, though, I think a vast majority of his listeners are getting their information from his program. And that's where I have a problem with it. But that's also, so then you say, okay, what do you do about that? And I don't think that there's anything to be done about it. How does Joe Rogan have to be more responsible in his show? I don't know that we can say that. But I also think that it is a problem when you have somebody like RFK on and he just spouts nonsense and Joe Rogan says, totally. Yeah.
Right.
Like I had a lot of friends who liked RFK because like they believed the nonsense he was spewing on things like Joe Rogan. And that starts to ask the question of like, I don't know.
No,
there's nothing to do about it. Right?
Yeah, that's a great point. You're totally right about that. I think there's a really good book about this if people are interested. It's called Revolt of the Public by Martin Gurry. And he talks about how in sort of the information era of like, you know, basically when the internet started until now with the digital era of information, he calls them like center organizations, but kind of the like hierarchical, authoritative, like the government is a good example, or like, right, a central organization used to have a monopoly on information. Mm-hmm. And so the media and the state could kind of work hand in hand to amplify whatever narrative was, convenient. And then you started to have ruptures in that, like with Vietnam, where when people start seeing what's actually happening, that's information that's not being mediated by like a news organization or something, they can actually see it. Then they start to question the legitimacy of the information. And now we're at a point where institutions in general have lost so much legitimacy with the public that information has become so, what's the word?
What's the truth anymore? I have no idea. Yeah.
Right. Like it's become so available in so many different ways through so many different channels that everybody's trying to make sense of what's legitimate and what's not, what's real and what's not. That there's almost like the silver lining that, yeah, you have more access to information so you can question like state power, but at the same time, you have less resources to understand and figure out what's true. And to a certain point, I think people just tune out and they start listening to, people that they trust, regardless of whether or not it's true. And it becomes very hard to verify truth.
I also think that that's part of the whole game, though, is to flood information into the things to keep the real stories from being, amplified, right? You can hide the real story.
It's certainly been weaponized. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. No, it's really problematic. And I don't know about you, but like I read articles now and I'm like, I see something like, I'm like, is that true? Is that actually true? And then I'll have to like check 2 or 3 places just to see if this article that back in the day I would have gotten a magazine like the New York or whatever and just been like, oh, that must be true. Right. But now anything I read now, I'm like, I don't, and then at the end of the day, I still don't know if it's true. And yeah, I don't know how a society continues to function when there is no agreed upon reality anymore. And maybe that's the thing that worries me the most is that, and that's the thing and maybe that should worry us the most, aside from all this, all the politics, is just like when reality becomes impossible to agree upon, how do we even come together at all? Because we're all siloed up so much in our own different pockets of, and they're all making money off of it too. So that's what outrage has been monetized. Do you know that Twitter got more downloads in the week after Charlie Kirk's death, more new downloads than ever before?
Oh, wow.
Yeah. How much money, I wonder, did Elon Musk make off of his death?
Yeah. And we've also got that new billionaire, U.S. billionaire Zionists buying TikTok.
That's not going to cause any problems there at all. Yeah, that's not going to be. I heard the Netanyahu thing where he was talking about how great it was. Like if he's saying it's great, it's bad. If Netanyahu's saying it's great, it's got to be bad.
He's basically our de facto president, but maybe that's a podcast for another time.
No, that's a whole rabbit hole that you've opened there. But you're an anti-Semite, Evelyn. I didn't know I was having an anti-Semite on the show.
Right, there you go. There's the closed epistemic feedback loop of the liberal worldview that I'm trying to get out of.
Exactly. See, we circled the square.
Yes.
That was a Hollywood Squares reference. Good Lord, help me. Do you know what that show was? Do you ever seen Hollywood Squares?
I can't say I have.
Oh, God, I can't believe I just did a Hollywood Squares reference. Oh, dear. Well, this is what happens. Evelyn, tell people about your Substack and the other things that you're writing for.
Yeah. So if you're interested in any of this stuff, I write usually once a week, sometimes twice on Substack. It's just Quartz Evelyn at substack.com or You'll find it if you just search Evelyn Quartz on Substack. And I have been doing some freelance writing. A lot of my interests are around these questions that we've been talking about. I'm really interested in political legitimacy at this moment. I think it's more than anything, we have a crisis of legitimacy and faith in our ability to, figure out whatever this moment is. I'm really interested in sort of this whole realignment issue, how the kind of next populist, these movements build, things like this. So yeah, if you're interested in any of that, I'm on Substack. And I've written periodically for The Lever and Compact magazine. I highly recommend both for people who are interested in this too. 2 really good independent media publications that are very critical. the lever focuses a lot on what we've been talking about a little bit, Jeff, the issue of money and corruption in politics.
Yeah, no, they're great. They've done a ton of good podcasts
Yes.
and so forth. And
Yes.
So,
And I will say that Compact is much more of kind of like a heterodox intellectual outlet. And it's also very good. So, yeah, you can find me.
yeah, Evelyn's one of the few sane voices on Substack anymore. So if you're on Substack, check her out. Has that been lucrative for you, if you don't mind me asking?
I mean, no, not a little bit, but not. That's not the main.
Well, sure.
it.
I know. I'm just curious
Yeah.
because I mean, everybody's got to make money, and if you can make money doing your writing on Substack, that'd be amazing.
I know some people do. You do have to have quite a bit of subscribers, paid subscribers.
Right, but you're building. You're still building. It's like 6 months now. You've been doing that.
Yeah, I've been very grateful at all of the support, and I've been able to connect with a lot of really great people who are writing about similar things. I think Substack is overall like a really positive place.
I think it's better than most of the places. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
In terms of social media, yeah, because it is social media. Like, let's be clear.
They've kind of gone in that direction. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's got a feed and everything now.
I know.
The only thing they don't have is like vertical videos that you can swipe up on repeatedly with your.
Oh God, Jeff, you're giving them ideas.
Even LinkedIn has that now too, I think, don't they? I think they have the swipe up videos.
One of the nice things about doing this work is I have not gone on LinkedIn in a long time.
Oh, good for you. I've had to go on LinkedIn. I actually got my free trial to LinkedIn Premium today so I can use their AI features to amp up my resume.
Oh no, Jeff.
Kill me.
The brave new world.
Yeah, God help us all. God help us all. Yeah, I don't know what's going to happen, but I need to get a job because, or more, I need to get a job or more Patreon subscribers. So if you're listening, go to my Patreon. After you go to Evelyn's Substack and subscribe to hers, then go to my Patreon and subscribe to mine. And then you'll make us both happy and you'll feel better too because everybody gets joy from helping other people.
Exactly.
See what I did there?
Yes.
See what I did there? I made it impossible. It's impossible not to accept that pitch. Now the ad companies are going to come running. Anyway, Evelyn, it was wonderful to talk to you again. I'm glad that you're, doing what you want to do and writing about what you want to write about and asking the questions that need to be asked in this dark time of our Lord 2025. Because personally, I'm confused. So it's nice to have people writing about and addressing this confusion in a way that seems sensible.
Thanks, Jeff. That means a lot. And thanks for having me. And this is awesome. Congrats on the podcast.
Of course. Thank you for coming on. And that was some political heterodoxy from Evelyn Quartz. You can and should follow Evelyn on Substack at quartzevelyn.substack.com. I'll put that in the show notes along with all the other stuff. You should read the show notes, by the way. They're fascinating and they're well written and they are succinct. If you do enjoy this show and you're still listening, please do like, rate, subscribe, and review. It helps so much. I say this every week, and I will say it every week. I wish there was another way to say it. Maybe I should have a song. Like, rate, subscribe, and review. Like, rate, subscribe, and review. Like, rate, subscribe, and review. You gotta know that's what you gotta do. That's not bad. That's gonna be a hit. I'm quitting podcasting and going into music now. But please do all of that. And send this to a friend of yours. Somebody who likes politics, somebody who's interested in new ways of thinking about politics, of solutions to the problems of our time. Send this to them. Send this podcast to them. They will love it, and they will thank you for it. And they'll be like, thank you so much for that podcast. I love it so much. It made me think about things in a new way, and I really appreciate you for it. And they'll get you a better gift for Christmas, probably. You can follow the podcast, and you should follow the podcast on Instagram at 1FJeffPod. You can, what else can you do? You can email the podcast at 1FJeffPod@gmail.com. Again, now that the episode's over, now you have a chance. You can turn the episode off now and you can go to patreon.com/1FJeff and subscribe to make this podcast go boom. I can't believe I've made 19 episodes. What was the statistic I heard? It was like only 5 to 10% of podcasts ever get to like 10 or 15 episodes. And I think if you get to 20, you're at like the top 5% of all podcasts. So go me. And thank you for continuing to listen, because, I mean, honestly, I would still do this if nobody was listening at all, but it'd be harder. If I looked at my stats and it was like 0, 0, 0, 0, I'd be like, what the fuck am I doing wrong? Because there's like a lot of people in the world. So somebody's got to be listening to it, right? Somebody. All right. Time for more Theraflu. Maybe just one more batch before I go to bed tonight. Thank you guys again for listening. I love you all. If you're struggling to get through these dark times, my advice as always is to put your fucking phone down. Go outside. Feel the sun on your face. Hug a tree. Lie down in the grass. Close your eyes. And pretend it all isn't happening. Because it really isn't.
Very good, Jeffrey.